camping removes the safety margins of controlled environments, placing individuals in direct contact with natural hazards and equipment risks. These 6 cases show how seemingly minor decisions in remote settings led to fatal outcomes shaped by environmental forces and preventable errors. It was August 12, 2017, at a primitive campsite in the Ozark National Forest, approximately 22 miles west of Russellville, Arkansas. Late afternoon humidity hung heavy across the clearing as mosquitoes swarmed from nearby wetlands, creating conditions where campers sought quick relief from persistent biting insects. Jessica Ramirez, 27, had organized a weekend trip with 2 friends from Little Rock. She worked as a dental hygienist and had recently become interested in wilderness skills, often watching online survival tutorials during her free time. Friends described her as eager to learn, but prone to impatience with slower methods. Her social media posts showed a pattern of attempting outdoor techniques she had only recently discovered. Their campsite sat in a small clearing bordered by dense hardwood forest. Park regulations allowed campfires within the metal fire ring, with posted instructions on fuel types and accelerating agents. 2 weeks of dry weather had left leaf litter and underbrush unusually receptive to ignition, though the campsite itself appeared stable and well-maintained. They arrived around mid-afternoon, set up their tents, and spent several hours exploring nearby trails. One friend, who regularly filmed hiking content, had placed a phone on a compact tripod at the picnic table with a wide-angle setting to capture casual footage of their camp routine. By early evening, mosquito activity increased sharply. The group used repellent sprays and citronella candles, but the insects persisted in heavy clusters around the site. Around 6:30 p.m., Jessica suggested making a smoky fire to disperse them, referencing a technique she had seen in online tutorials. She gathered damp leaves and green wood, materials known to produce smoke, but slow and inconsistent ignition. The group built a small fire in the designated ring and allowed it to burn down to embers. The phone's camera recorded them discussing the smoke output and adjusting the fuel. When the smoldering leaves failed to produce the expected barrier, Jessica grew frustrated. She retrieved a bottle of denatured alcohol from their supplies, a stove fuel she believed could stimulate the smoldering material. Online demonstrations she recalled involved cold pits, not active embers. Footage captured her unscrewing the bottle and holding it several feet above the fire ring as she poured. The alcohol ignited the instant it reached the hot embers, producing a flash that raced up the stream of liquid in less than a second. Flames reached the bottle opening, igniting the vapors inside and creating a sustained torch effect. Jessica reflexively threw the bottle, but burning fuel had already splashed onto her clothing. Her synthetic shirt ignited immediately, melting into her skin as she ran in panic, which increased airflow and flame spread. One friend grabbed a sleeping bag and tackled her to the ground, smothering the flames while the other called emergency services. The phone continued recording the scene as they extinguished the fire and attempted to stabilize her. The entire sequence, from ignition to suppression, lasted under a minute. Jessica sustained extensive burns on her torso, arms, and hands. She remained conscious but showed signs of shock while her friends attempted first aid. Emergency responders reached the site approximately 35 minutes later using Forest Service roads. Jessica was critically injured from extensive burns and evacuated to a regional hospital. She was later transferred to a burn center, where she died 4 days later from complications related to thermal injury and inhalation damage. Investigators reviewed the retained phone footage, which clearly documented the alcohol pour, flash ignition, and the pattern of fire spread. Fire specialists noted that accelerants poured onto active embers ignite instantly due to vapor flashback, a hazard frequently underestimated by inexperienced campers. Following the incident, park officials expanded fire safety guidelines to warn specifically against using liquid fuels to manipulate campfire smoke levels. Training programs later incorporated the case to highlight the dangers of attempting online survival methods without formal instruction. It was January 14, 2021, at a backcountry campsite in the White Mountain National Forest, approximately 25 miles northwest of Conway, New Hampshire. Overnight temperatures had dropped to -15 degrees Fahrenheit, creating conditions where prolonged exposure without adequate heating could lead to hypothermia within hours. Kurt Lopez, 32, was an experienced winter camper from Boston who had organized a weekend trip with 3 friends. He worked as an outdoor equipment sales associate and had completed multiple winter camping courses. Friends described him as knowledgeable about gear, but sometimes willing to bend guidelines when conditions became uncomfortable. His social media posts showed a pattern of prioritizing comfort over strict adherence to manufacturer warnings. The group established their campsite in a clearing surrounded by dense pine forest. By evening, temperatures had fallen faster than anticipated, making the tent interior uncomfortably cold despite winter gear. One friend had set up a GoPro camera connected to an external battery pack inside the tent entrance to document their winter camping experience. Around 9 p.m., Kurt retrieved a portable propane heater designed for outdoor use with specific warnings against operation in enclosed spaces due to carbon monoxide production. The instruction manual contained multiple warnings about ventilation requirements. The group decided to run the heater longer than usual due to extreme cold. The camera recorded Kurt positioning the heater in the tent center and zipping all openings, completely closed. He placed his sleeping bag closest to the heater for maximum warmth, while his 3 friends positioned themselves further back. The heater burned steadily for approximately 3 hours, gradually consuming oxygen and producing carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless. The heater continued burning inside the sealed tent, filling the enclosed space with carbon monoxide. Kurt, positioned closest to the heater, was exposed to the highest concentration for the longest period of time. The camera continued recording as the group fell asleep around midnight with the heater running, unaware that carbon monoxide concentration had reached dangerous levels near the heater. Around 6 a.m., one member woke feeling nauseous and partially unzipped the tent door for fresh air. The camera captured this moment and the subsequent discovery that Kurt remained unresponsive. This allowed some ventilation for the others, but Kurt, positioned at the point of highest exposure, had already reached critical carbon monoxide levels. His friends became alarmed when they could not wake him. The footage showed them opening the tent fully and pulling him into fresh air, then calling for emergency assistance using a satellite communication device. The campsite was 3 miles from a Forest Service road accessible by snowmobile. Search and rescue teams reached the location approximately 90 minutes after the call. Responders found Kurt unresponsive with no pulse. Despite resuscitation attempts, he could not be revived. The coroner determined he died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Blood analysis showed carbon monoxide levels consistent with prolonged exposure at the highest concentration point. Investigation revealed the heater had functioned normally, with no mechanical defects. The camera footage provided clear documentation of the setup and conditions that led to the fatal outcome. Following the incident, outdoor retailers enhanced warning displays on portable heaters and expanded educational materials about combustion devices in enclosed camping spaces. It was August 7, 2018, along the banks of the Salmon River, approximately 18 miles east of Stanley, Idaho. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rocky shoreline as the river flowed steadily at normal summer levels, creating conditions where the water's behavior appeared calm despite upstream weather systems that could alter flow rates within hours. David Kowalski, 38, was a solo backpacker from Portland, Oregon, who had driven to Idaho for a week-long wilderness camping trip. He worked as a software developer and had taken up solo camping 2 years earlier. Friends described him as methodical in planning, but relatively inexperienced with reading natural warning signs in wilderness environments. His camping journal showed he selected campsites based on scenic value rather than safety considerations. The riverbank where David established his campsite featured a flat, grassy area approximately 15 feet wide along the water's edge. The soil consisted of loose sediment deposited during previous high water events, appearing solid but lacking root structure. Small erosion channels along the bank indicated ongoing water movement that gradually undermined the soil foundation. David arrived around 4 p.m. and set up his tent roughly 8 feet from the water's edge. He mounted a trail camera on a sturdy pine tree approximately 20 feet back, angled to capture wildlife activity overnight. Weather conditions showed clear skies with no precipitation. Heavy thunderstorms had developed in the mountain watershed approximately 40 miles upstream that afternoon. Weather data later showed these storms dropped nearly 2 inches of rain within 3 hours. This water began moving downstream, gradually increasing flow rates. By early evening, David had completed his setup. His journal entry from around 7:30 p.m. noted the peaceful sound of the river. The increased water volume reached David's campsite sometime after 10 p.m. The trail camera captured the river's flow rate increasing substantially, raising the water level by approximately 2 feet within 30 minutes. The footage showed the surge beginning to erode the loose sediment, forming the riverbank foundation. The erosion accelerated as elevated water flow undercut the bank's structure. The camera recorded the soil beneath David's tent collapsing into the river as the foundation washed away. The tent, still secured by stakes, shifted toward the water as the bank gave way. The footage showed the entire section of bank where the tent sat, approximately 10 feet wide, sliding into the river. The tent entered the water still partially intact, disappearing downstream as the current pulled it away. A fishing guide operating on the river the following morning noticed camping equipment caught in vegetation approximately 2 miles downstream, where it had snagged on a fallen tree. He investigated and discovered the collapsed tent partially submerged. Emergency responders recovered David's body from inside the tent, still trapped in his sleeping bag, with the tent fabric wrapped tightly around him. The coroner determined he died from drowning, likely disoriented and unable to find the exit in dark water. Investigation of the original campsite revealed the collapsed bank section. The trail camera, positioned far enough back on stable ground, survived and documented the rising water and the riverbank collapse, but not what happened after the tent entered the current. Weather data confirmed the upstream storms. Park officials later installed warning signs at river camping areas about the dangers of camping on unstable banks and flash flooding from distant weather events. It was July 22, 2020, on an exposed ridgeline in the Teton Range, approximately 12 miles southwest of Jackson, Wyoming. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the granite spine of the ridge as darker clouds began building over the western peaks. Summer weather in the Tetons often shifted rapidly, and elevated terrain like this ridgeline was known to amplify the risk of sudden electrical storms. Penelope Miller, 29, had led 3 friends on a weekend backpacking trip through the high country. A marketing consultant from Denver, she had planned the outing as both a birthday celebration and an opportunity to photograph alpine landscapes during golden hour. Friends later described her as organized and energetic, but drawn to dramatic locations even when they carried added risk. Her past trips frequently involved campsites chosen for views rather than shelter. The group reached the ridgeline shortly after 3:30 p.m. The narrow crest offered sweeping views in every direction, but provided no tree cover, rock overhangs, or depressions that could shield them from the weather. Park guidance recommended descending from exposed terrain during afternoon storm periods, yet the sky appeared stable when they arrived. They decided to set camp rather than lose the light. Penelope positioned a camera on a small tripod to capture a time-lapse of the changing sky and distant peaks. The group pitched their tents on bare granite patches where soil was thin and drainage was poor. Metal hiking poles were left upright near the tents, placed temporarily aside while gear was organized. By around 5 p.m., cloud development intensified over the western horizon. The camera footage later reviewed by investigators showed the sky darkening more rapidly than expected. Wind picked up along the ridge, carrying the first signs of rain. Despite growing uncertainty, the group remained in place, believing the storm might pass nearby without directly crossing the ridge. By 6:15 p.m., the storm moved directly overhead. Rain began falling steadily, soaking the exposed granite and creating a conductive surface. Gusts of wind swept across the ridge as thunder echoed between peaks. The group retreated into their tents to wait out the weather. At approximately 6:34 p.m., a lightning strike hit the ridgeline near the campsite. Investigators later determined the strike contacted exposed ground on the ridge rather than a specific object. The camera recorded a sudden flash and momentary wash of white light across the frame. Electrical energy spread outward through the saturated granite surface, creating a powerful ground current. Penelope was inside her tent, positioned several feet from where the current traveled across the rock. The electricity passed beneath the tent floor and through the area where she was lying. Moments after the flash, her companions emerged and found her unresponsive. One attempted CPR, while another activated a satellite messenger to request emergency assistance. Due to the remote location and deteriorating weather, a rescue helicopter reached the ridgeline approximately 50 minutes later. Despite continued resuscitation attempts, Penelope showed no signs of life. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner later determined the cause of death to be cardiac arrest resulting from lightning-induced ground current. Investigators reviewing the footage and site conditions confirmed the group's exposure, the absence of shelter, and the role of wet granite in transmitting electrical energy. Park officials later emphasized that even indirect lightning strikes on exposed terrain can be fatal, especially when storms develop rapidly at high-elevation campsites. It was September 3, 2019, in the backcountry of Glacier National Park, approximately 8 miles north of West Glacier, Montana. Early autumn temperatures dropped sharply overnight as bears increased foraging ahead of hibernation, creating conditions where improper food storage placed campers at heightened risk of wildlife encounters. Michael Torres, 35, was on a solo trip from Seattle seeking 4 days of wilderness camping. He worked as a graphic designer and often used outdoor travel to collect photography content. Friends described him as confident in remote settings, but dismissive of regulations he considered unnecessary. His social media posts showed a pattern of storing food inside tents rather than in bear-proof containers. The campsite included a metal storage box positioned 50 yards from the tent pads, with posted warnings about recent bear activity. Rangers required all scented items to be secured overnight, and signs at the trailhead documented prior violations that had resulted in aggressive bear behavior. Michael arrived around 4 p.m., set up his tent, and mounted a motion-activated trail camera aimed toward the surrounding trees. After cooking dinner, he cleaned his equipment but placed his food bag inside his tent rather than using the bear box. The bag contained meals and energy-dense snacks, capable of drawing bears from long distances. As darkness fell around 7:30 p.m., the camera recorded only small animal movement. By 10 p.m., Michael was asleep while temperatures dropped into the low 40s. At 2:15 a.m., the camera detected a large figure entering the clearing. Wildlife officials later estimated the grizzly at roughly 400 pounds. The bear moved directly toward the tent, following the scent emanating from the stored food. Footage showed the bear pushing against the fabric while trying to locate the source. Michael awoke and attempted to scare the bear away by creating noise from inside the tent. The bear withdrew briefly, but continued circling. After several minutes, it returned to the entrance area and began tearing through the fabric with its claws. The camera captured the tent collapsing as the bear forced a larger opening. The camera showed the tent collapsing as the bear forced a larger opening, while the interior of the tent remained out of view. The interaction lasted less than a minute before noise diminished. Moments later, the bear exited carrying the food bag and left the immediate area. The camera continued recording the damaged tent through the remainder of the night with no further activity. A ranger conducting morning checks found the torn tent and discovered Michael unresponsive inside. Responders confirmed he had died from injuries consistent with a grizzly attack during a food-conditioned encounter. The coroner determined massive trauma resulted from the bear's attempt to access the food. Investigators found that the food bag was the only item taken, confirming the bear's primary motivation was caloric intake rather than predatory behavior. The trail camera provided a continuous record of the approach, the prolonged inspection, and the forced entry. Park officials later expanded educational materials on food storage enforcement and began using the incident as a case example of the dangers associated with keeping food inside tents in active bear habitat. It was June 18, 2023, at a campground in the Adirondack Mountains, approximately 15 miles south of Lake Placid, New York. Evening temperatures remained mild as campers settled in, creating conditions where equipment failures inside sealed tents could accumulate overnight without detection. Daniel Park, 45, was on a father-son weekend trip from Boston. He worked as an accountant and hoped to reconnect before his son left for college. Friends described him as organized and cautious in most daily routines. His camping gear, however, had been stored for years with little maintenance of aging components. The pair selected a level clearing bordered by pine trees. Their four-season tent significantly limited airflow when fully zipped, prioritizing insulation over ventilation. Daniel brought a portable propane stove, a common two-burner model with a threaded valve and rubber gasket that connected to the fuel canister. They arrived mid-afternoon, hiked, and returned around 6 p.m. to prepare dinner. After cleaning up, Daniel disconnected the propane canister and stored both stove and fuel inside the tent to keep them dry. Unknown to him, the stove's valve seal had deteriorated, allowing a slow propane leak to begin once enclosed. Propane, heavier than air, collected along the tent floor through the night. A small action camera, positioned near the entrance to record portions of their trip, documented calm conditions but showed no visible indication of gas buildup. By early morning, the sealed interior had reached a flammable concentration. Around 6:30 a.m., Daniel retrieved the stove to prepare breakfast. The action camera recorded him reconnecting the canister near the entrance. When he activated the ignition switch, the spark ignited the accumulated propane. A sudden flash ignition spread through the tent, rupturing the fabric and igniting the synthetic material within seconds. The rapid pressure release and fabric failure threw the action camera clear of the tent, preserving the memory card despite heat damage to the housing. Daniel's son, sleeping near the rear, was thrown backward and suffered severe burns as the tent ignited around him. Daniel, positioned directly over the ignition point, received the full impact of the explosion and resulting flames. Nearby campers heard the blast and rushed toward the site, finding the tent engulfed and both occupants outside. Emergency responders arrived within 20 minutes. Daniel was pronounced dead at the scene from injuries consistent with blast trauma and thermal exposure. His son survived after transfer to a regional burn center. Investigators examined the stove assembly and confirmed the degraded gasket as the source of the leak. Propane residue on the tent remnants supported the accumulation model, and the ejected camera's memory card captured the ignition sequence. Officials concluded that long-term storage without component inspection allowed the valve failure to go unnoticed. Manufacturers later reinforced warnings about inspecting stove valves before each use and avoiding propane storage inside sealed tents. Park authorities expanded educational materials, emphasizing ventilation and proper placement of fuel equipment near sleeping areas. The case demonstrated how a subtle mechanical defect combined with confined space can escalate into a lethal event once ignition occurs. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.